You know, over the years, the Guild has been asked to do an awful lot of different jobs, and by a variety of clients.
Straight back.
This summer, a local distiller turns up with a very leaky little 1967 amphicar.
Do you have your boater's license?
Yeah.
We've done amphicars before. Matter of fact, prize-winning amphicars.
When you say absolutely no leaks on a 1967 amphicar, that means 90% no leaks.
Yeah, it's a tall task for sure.
Yeah.
So it wasn't something that was out of our wheelhouse. But then the Canadian military showed up.
Ooh, geez.
Wanting to restore a 1940s field artillery tractor.
The truck's had outside for at least the last 20 years.
It looks like it might be a pretty challenging job, but it's one I'd really like to do. So I guess I'll go and get some staff. So the chaps at the Canadian military base in Pahwa,
It looks like it had a little misadventure here, eh?
they phoned me up and asked me to help them restore a World War II field artillery tractor, something they call a FAT.
Just like that.
So they invited me up there to take a look. I said, well, you know, seeing an engine laying on the floor is not really going to tell us anything. I really need it here. My guys need to take it apart. We can see what we've got.
In Pahwa, we have the base, which has a museum on it that has a varied collection of fighting vehicles, anywhere from World War II to present day. It includes tanks, fighting vehicles, transport vehicles, and also guns and artillery pieces. At the museum, there happened to be a FAT. We would like to marry up the artillery tractor to the gun and the limber to pay homage to the soldiers that had lost their life during the Canoe River Memorial. 21 November 1950, what happened was a Canoe River accident. During the Korean War, there were soldiers dispatched from WWII from here in base Pahwa. They were on their way over to Korea with the 25-pounder and the limber, which is behind me. They were aboard a cargo train heading west to be sent over to Korea. At the same time, there was a passenger train coming east, and they met head-on. 17 soldiers of 2RCHA lost their lives. 3 soldiers were never found. They were using the exact equipment which is behind us. So these were the guns that were in fact to be used during the Korean War. What we're doing right now is providing a living memory to these soldiers.
And if we can get this job done for them, they're going to have this amazing, very rare artillery tractor, and they have a palanquin for the top of it. That is a piece that was fixed on a gun on which you put a coffin.
We'd like to use these for memorials. We'd like to use these for firing salutes. We'd like to use these more often so that people know that we had actually lost men on the way over to Korea.
So this is really worthwhile.
If you take that off and it's all rusted in the whole bit, I mean, with these,
Oh, yeah.
What's making them nervous is the engine. And this old truck's been sitting outside the museum for decades, and they have no idea what kind of condition the engine's in right now.
with a limited budget to rebuild this engine, you got to replace everything. You're already looking $4,000 or $5,000.
Oh, easily.
You know, just an overall look at this old Flathead is that it just doesn't look to be in very good shape.
The pistons are seized. The crank's seized, so I'm going to loosen off the crank and see if anything will turn.
It looked really, really bad. Rust in the cylinders. It's been apart for a while. We're into something fairly major here.
You know, from sitting for years and years and years, it's probably corroded.
So let's see what we've got going on with the rods that are there.
This Flathead motor's a military unit, so we have a fairly tight budget for it. We got to check the bearings, we got to check the pistons, we got to check the crank, make sure everything's not all scarred up. If it is, the budget's blown before we even start, really. I'll just give it a little bit of a tap, see if they come open.
I mean, this isn't one of the priorities of the Canadian military, so, I mean, we have to sort of work with them to do it as inexpensively as possible. So we're going to help them do the engine, but meanwhile, they've got mechanics and body people and other technicians on the military base restoring the rest of the truck.
We're a 2-service battalion maintenance company. We have people of different trades that repair different items inside this one building. We repair handguns, rifles, bazookas, as they say, what we call them Carl Gustavs, from the smallest handgun to the largest artillery gun, that's the M777. Maintenance of anything that's basically painted green in the military. The field artillery truck right now is in the final processes of getting repaired.
The body of the vehicle has been stripped down and cleaned and sanded and all painted. The frame of the vehicle, same so, and also the tires.
We're very lucky at this base that we have the full capability of doing a complete restoration from the ground up. We have a sandblasting booth, which is the same size as this paint shop, so we can sandblast a complete tank from ground up. What remains to be done is the reassembly of the vehicle when the engine and transmission is completed, repaired from the Guild.
They've got the motor, they've got the transmission, and multiple other parts down there as well. Eventually, with a combination of a mechanic from the Guild, a mechanic from 2RCH8,
Yeah, there we go.
we're going to marry everything all up together to make this working vehicle.
My love of military vehicles started a long time ago. My father was in the Royal Canadian Air Force, and I used to go to the air base, so I sort of saw new fighters and old stuff and that on the apron being used, and it stuck. And an airplane I always wanted, and I have no idea why this one really stood out, was an aircraft called the Vultee Valiant. You know, the Vultee Valiant is sort of a forgotten aircraft these days, but in the 1940s, it was the most common American trainer in their arsenal. They had a big Pratt & Whitney 450 horsepower radial on the nose, and after the war, became the favorite of crop dusters and bush pilots. Back in the 40s, they used to call them the Vultee Vibrator. I mean, it's a challenging aircraft to fly, but boy, it's a lot of fun. When I first got this airplane, I had specially prepared and restored an old Massey Ferguson lawn tractor to move a couple of my other airplanes around. And I hooked it up to this, and I proudly pulled it out of the hangar, and I made a turn towards the tank farm to gas it up, and while the tractor turned, the plane did not. Well, so then my search began for the right kind of equipment to pull it. And at a farm auction where they were selling a whole bunch of Allis-Chalmers tractors, there was an Allis-Chalmers aircraft tug. Incredibly rare and exactly what I wanted. I bid on it, I got it. It was a little bit down at the heels. So, I want to get this painted in the next little while. It's actually a pretty valuable piece. Doesn't look it, but yeah. It was made in 1953, and this one apparently served on an American aircraft carrier that was based in San Diego. It would have been made to haul some pretty heavy airplanes around. You know, by the 50s, they were flying some pretty heavy aircraft off of aircraft carriers. I don't think you'd want this running over your steel toe. No. Yeah. So I decided to restore it back to its original design.
Ooh. Well, that's really interesting.
Red 3, go!
Now for the fun part. Let's see what we got going on here.
We've got to basically take the crank out of this and the camshafts and find out if the pieces are corroded. It doesn't have heads on it. The pistons should be free. Should be able to turn it over by hand, and it doesn't. So they're seizing.
Come on. With these end of these studs, and because they're threaded in and they're countersunk and sealed on there,
You can give them a tap and just to see if they move.
ooh. Well, that's really interesting. The bearing surfaces don't really look bad, and neither does the cranks. Crank looks pretty good too.
So once I start taking it apart, notice that the bearings are actually lubricated. There's oil in there. There's no scarring that I can see on the crank yet.
See, that one's nice. Look at that. And the bearing's still in there, and it is pretty pristine looking.
Oh yeah, you could use that. It wouldn't be making any noise. Checking in on Greg. He's got a couple of the bearing caps pulled off, and to our great surprise, they look pretty clean. I mean, it certainly shows a tiny amount of wear, but not anything near what I was expecting. Oh, geez, that's moving. When he gently tapped the rod down, it moved.
It looks like the pistons are gonna move through the bore okay, and it might just need to be rings and hone the cylinders and clean up the crank.
I honestly have visions of pulling those caps off with a chisel.
Oh, and having them seized right on.
And finding that the journals and everything are just nothing but rust. I think what we have here is literally a sheep in lion's clothing. You know, military stuff literally didn't get used much, or it got burned up.
Yeah.
It could very well be this thing just doesn't have any miles on it, it's just suffering from sitting. It was filthy dirty and it's been sitting for years, but internally, it looks like it's been sealed up and it's been safe over the years.
I might just lube it up, leave it overnight, and see how it goes in the morning.
Yeah.
These ones are a little tight in here, but
He's got 2 pistons he can't move yet. He wants to soak it down a little bit. At that point, we may be able to pull those pistons out of the cylinders and then divorce the crank from the block. Take a look at her in the morning and then we'll start making phone calls.
Okay, sounds good.
So we can phone up the military base and tell them the good news and then tell them the bad news. The bad news is their engine's good enough to rebuild. What it costs is sort of beyond our control. But because of the condition of the internal parts of this motor, it's gonna be better news than I had thought it was gonna be.
get this little bugger out of there would be nice.
It's gonna be really interesting having military mechanics here because they have a whole different outlook to the way they work on things. Like, they're under fire.
Attention! Marshal. Sergeant. Fenton. Sergeant. LC. No, he's on tasking at RDS.
In the military, we have to be out in the field and we have to be capable of maintaining, fixing, repairing our vehicles so that we can use it at all times.
In the Canadian Army, everybody is a soldier first. We all have the same basic training and the ability to move, shoot, communicate, and survive in a field environment. These mechanics could be turning wrenches 1 minute and then surge into battle the next minute if they get attacked.
So when we go into a battle, vehicles move across open terrain, and there could be lots of rocks, or they could be hit by the enemy, and it damages the vehicles. So the mechanics will actually move forward with what's called a wrecker.
This is the wrecker. When we come to the side of the road, to be able to pick up the vehicle that is broken down, the wrecker is equipped with the kind of tools we can do the job on the side of the road, depending on the job that we need.
We bring the garage to the battlefield, and then we're able to bring the vehicles in, rapidly repair them, and then get them back into the fight.
And these are the tools that we would use when we need to do the job in a timely fashion.
It's not just about sitting in a nice workshop, it's nice and warm. Anybody can fix equipment that way. Try fixing it in the middle of winter at -40. Can you do repairs for that? Can you do repairs at plus 50 degrees where they did in Afghanistan, where an egg would fry on your vehicle? That's the kind of conditions that we operate in and to be able to do repairs.
As soon as an attack occurs, the troops will drop the wrenches or grab their rifles, assume their defensive positions, and they'll be able to react to an attack.
Trench free! 25 meters, normal climb, 1 leg move, go!
Then, a quick reaction force will be dispatched to clear the threat. Fantastic exercise. All the pieces are working well together. Mission accomplished.
Let's go!
Once you come into a combat unit, you are cross-trained throughout the whole unit. When we go off to battle, quite often the gunners are so fatigued that the mechanic will come up and fire an artillery piece.
This is a firepower demonstration from the 2nd Regiment Royal Canadian Horse Artillery. The HLVW gun tractor tows the howitzer from the barrel first. It takes about 1 minute to bring it into action from the gun, unhook it, spread the trails, and then start deploying the gun. Let's go! They're shooting M777 howitzers, 155 millimeter caliber. It's in a direct fire capacity where the gun line can actually see the target. Get that C6 going! Let's go! Let's go! This machine gun crew is using a C6 7.62 caliber machine gun. At the end of the line, we have a Carl Gustav anti-tank weapon. It's good for things like ambushes or defensive positions like we have here. Then we have the light armored vehicle, the LAV-6. It can punch through light armor and have a good effect on vehicles. Let's go!
Flaps are up. Mixture rich. Clear. Mel really did his research, and he's done a great job of restoring this Alice Chalmers aircraft tug. Oh, nice. They'll be able to see me tooling around in this.
Whoa, got torque.
This is a great little tug. It's got great brakes, and it's got lots of torque. All in all, it's exactly what I wanted. It's small, it's compact, it's amazingly heavy. And these are all things that it needed to be, because on an aircraft carrier, they had a lot of big airplanes. This tug is just precise. I can see under the plane, I can see the tail wheel, I can line it all up, and the smallest twitch of that wheel directs the back of this airplane. It has just over a 40-foot wingspan, and the hangar door is 42 feet wide, so that tells you how much room I got. Boy, I'm really pleased with it, because it handles this old airplane just like they were made as a pair. This Vultee survived simply because in 1945, somebody put it in a warehouse, and it stayed in that warehouse until 1996. 1996, it came out, it was fixed up and took to the air again. So it's pretty much an original aircraft, and that makes it extraordinarily rare, considering that Vultee Valiants are rare anyway. You know, people think trainers are easy airplanes, and that wasn't the idea. Training aircraft were generally made to be challenging. It is a pretty complex airplane. There's a lot going on in the cockpit, and that can overcome you sometimes. I had a problem with my knee board, where I keep a lot of the flight information and the checklist for the airplane and everything. It's sort of critical. You need it. And I had pieces falling off it and that, so I took it to Al, and he whipped up just a couple little brackets for me.
Oh, hey, I've got a little issue with it. I want to be able to get the emergency procedures, because when I had an engine failure a couple of weeks ago, I didn't even bother trying to get to these.
Okay, got it. So you can just flip this whole thing back and out of the way.
Exactly.
Al's building, multi-million-dollar cars. He's a coach builder. He's doing all this metal work. But when somebody comes in with something trivial for him to do, he doesn't have it to say, no, I'm busy right now.
What if I just weld an 1/8 of an inch rod to 2 of these little snap rings?
He says, yes, I will get that done for you.
Yeah, that would work. Cool.
And Dave's clipboard would be one of those little incidents.
So what I want Al to do is just to make a couple little clips in a rod so that this stuff is going to stay on the knee board when I'm busy doing other things.
That goes in here. Clamp that down there. This is your current checklist stuff. And if you end up needing to get to that back emergency area, just flip it over, call it a day.
Okay, flaps are up. Trims, 0 and 0. You know, I sort of still like the original kind of checklist, printed on paper and clipped on your leg. Throttle, 3/4 of an inch. Mixture rich. I mean, a lot of pilots are using checklists on their iPads now. Fuel, on reserve. But you know, when your engine fails in flight, it might be a bit much to boot up the iPad and find the right page and find the section where it tells you how to restart your engine. Okay? Well, you can do it, but maybe not before you hit the ground. 3, clear. One of the really neat things about this airplane is it has something called a buzz number on it. It's a great big number painted on these trainers during the Second World War to identify them. And the reason for that was when an airplane was buzzing your ranch house and you went running outside and you phoned the airbase and said, a big silver airplane just buzzed my place, they would look outside and see 500 silver airplanes. So they started painting buzz numbers on so they would catch these young kids when they were buzzing people in low altitude over beaches and just misbehaving as 18, 19-year-olds might do. Of course, knowing my plane has a buzz number on it keeps me honest.